Everybody, this is Abhyuday from LawSikho. Today we are going to look at how to handle 360-degree employment related formalities for CXOs. Okay, so we're also live on Zoom, on YouTube. Okay, so just give me a second. Okay, I'm starting. Sorry about the delay today. Okay, as new people, as you join in, just keep sharing what you all are currently doing, what area of HR you're working on. Okay, so starting now. See, so getting CXO related. So what is a CXO? CXO is like Chief Executive Officer, Chief Operations Officer, okay, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Marketing Officer, Chief People Officer, okay. CHRO is also there, Chief Human Relations Officer or Chief Human Resources Officer. So getting CXO employment contracts right is very important. For who? For the promoters, the founders who started the company, and the investors who are investing in a company, right? Now, attracting the right talent for what is the purpose of, why do you want to get CXO contracts right? You want to attract the right kind of talent for top positions of a company. That's one of the top priorities for a promoter. That's a top priority for an investor. If they are attracting the right talent for the company will grow, right? And if this is not done, it is not possible for a business to succeed. Okay. The next part is that if you attract the right talent, you have to give them the right kind of offer, right kind of opportunities, and then also retain them. And that also is a challenge, right? A bad contract now in this regard can ruin everything. And a harsh contract. So if you have a bad contract, it can ruin things for the company. If it's too harsh on the CXO, you will not be able to attract the right talent. So it will be a non-starter, right? Now, how do you hire, onboard, and activate top professionals in CXO positions? What are your responsibilities as an HR manager for these roles? So you may not have worked on this area. A lot of you in this session haven't worked on this area, right? But that doesn't matter. Skill sets in this area are very scarce, and there is a great need for talent on this. You can be a great asset for legal and compliance teams to get to work with the board of directors of the company. Okay, so that's a matter of great pride, right? If you were working with the board of directors on some of these issues, it would straight away be a matter. It would straight away, elevate your importance in the company. How many of you agree? Now, there's a lot more to CXO employment contracts than just your regular salary, benefits, bonus, working hours, and leave. This is what HR managers hiring factory workers or junior level employees in shops or offices. That's what we focus on, right? That's been the traditional area of focus for in employment laws. But CXO employment contracts are a new league altogether. Okay, so what is new about CXO employment contracts, and why do we say that it can be important? See, CXOs have access to a lot of strategic information about the company. They have access to resources about the company. If they misuse it, it can be very damaging for the company. Who can protect the company from that kind of misuse? You as an HR manager. There are other issues also which can impact the reputation, the image of an organization. You will need to address various things like possible conflicts of interest, threat of future competition from a CXO who leaves. You may need to negotiate indemnity. You may have the right kind of disclosure clauses, so that CXOs tell you if there's a conflict of interest, if there's something they need to say, if there's a issue they need to point, if there's an issue that can impact the company's operations, they should disclose it rather than hide it, right? So you want that kind of behavior to be incentivized. And how do you do that? You have an opportunity to do that through employment contracts. Okay, if you're too strict or if you're too onerous, it may be difficult to attract, retain, and incentivize the right talent. So you need to strike a balance. And what kind of balance is important, which side to lean on, let's discuss that. Incentive schemes also for CXOs can be very complicated. Okay, for example, for do you understand the difference between something like a ESOP versus sweat equity? How many of you understand the difference between ESOP and sweat equity? Who can tell me on chat what's the difference? These are some of the things you need to be aware of, and it's not to scare you, okay? It's not that difficult to get to it once you start learning this. But if you already understand, you can let us know. Do you understand the different ways in which remuneration and incentives of senior professionals are structured so that their tax can be minimized and other liability can be minimized? Like when you create a regular salary structure, what do? You try to minimize key what will be the organization spend on PF, okay, or other ESI or other related contributions. How can we minimize, the contribution? How will we divide the allowances and the basic salary? Right now, here in top executive compensation, you'll also have to see, acha, how do we help uh, different parties in minimizing their tax liability? Also, how do we help them have the right incentives? Also, okay. So there's one more benefit now, by the way, that I want to tell you about, of learning employment related formalities of CXOs. Do you know what that benefit is? Okay. There are similarities in this work. So if you can do the work for CXOs, you can do the work for any startup or technology company employees in the country. Okay, what does that mean? Now, one part is early stage startups. But what about big startups like Zomato, Paytm, Swiggy, Ola? Okay, these are startups which have been funded by 3 or 4 rounds, okay, already for 3 or 4 rounds, meaning they have had multiple investors put in millions of dollars into the company. They have a few hundreds of employees, maybe even 1,000 employees. Okay, so how do you actually structure the contracts of some of their senior employees, okay, or their office employees? How do you go about that? Now, CXO structure and this are connected. Okay, so they are connected. I'll tell you how. First, let us see. I've been saying that this work is important, but why is it important? How do we know that it is important? Let's look at a few trends and case studies first. Okay, there's a company, Altico Capital Limited, okay, recently defaulted on interest payments to its lenders. Became a big issue in the banking sector, and I'll explain how in the NBFC sector. This is not a bank, it's a non-banking financial company. It had a new CEO who had an INR 10 crore remuneration. So this is a case study, okay? I'm explaining with example of a case study. Then I'll explain with example of a few trends also. This company had a new CEO with a contract of 10 crores for 6 months, okay? It was a 6-month contract. 50% of the amount was already paid out, okay? The company was facing insolvency, okay? And what happens when the company is facing insolvency? There are all the lenders, all the creditors, they basically then decide, if the company doesn't have enough money to meet its obligations, they decide how to restructure the company, okay? But at that time, then what happens? They also come to know about details of the company's contracts and obligations. So when they found out that this is what kind of contract the CEO has, okay, the contract had terms like assured payout, hardship allowance, continuity allowance, and it was seen that the company had defaulted on something like, on crores of interest towards a bank. So what happened was that there was a huge outcry over this. RBI discussed in a committee meeting of its internal committee meeting. Why did RBI discuss it? Because when there are very important issues in the banking sector or non-banking financial sector, then usually RBI gets involved as the sector ka regulator. So they discussed that a clawing back of the compensation must happen. Do you know what clawing back is? You take the money back. Okay, clawing back means that there are circumstances in which the company can claim the money back. Okay, so RBI discussed that there should be a clawback for the CEO, and it's not confirmed right now, but in the market now, there are news items which are talking about this, that there may be a clawback and a resignation of the CEO. Now, RBI in the banking sector separately has put in guidelines for all banks so that they can put a clawback mechanism for their full-time directors, okay, and various categories of staff, okay. Now this is fine, this is something that a legal team needs to know or a compliance team needs to know, but how do you administer this internally? See, RBI guidelines exist, but inside the bank, how do you make it very clear for people? How do you emphasize its importance. How do you track it? How do you enforce it? Indian Companies Act also has provisions related to clawback of director compensation. In case there is fraud and all of that, then there can be compensation can be recovered. So if you were paid an incentive for high sales and it was later figured out that some of the sales were inflated, and you got an incentive because you had inflated the sales figures, and now the company's accounts require to be corrected because you didn't follow, let's say, the rules for accounting. Okay, and you recorded sales when the sale wasn't confirmed. So then what will happen to the incentive that the director claimed? The company can claim it back. Are you all following till here? Say yes if you're following till here. So the company can claim it back. Okay, as per the provisions also. Now, this clause also came to light in Chanda Kocher's case, where the whole issue about ICICI and the loan to Videocon Group and all of that was in picture. Okay, so clawback clause again came to light in that case, and now it has become a common speak. Like, people understand when you say clawback, they understand what you mean. You can also refer to Infosys's recoupment policy. Okay, this is there from a while. Okay, it's a listed company, right? 2016, say, short one pager policy, not a very complex one. Okay, and it's saying that if Infosys restates its financial statements for fraud or non-compliance, it will recover any incentive based compensation by any executive officer in excess of what would have been payable. It means CEO or any executive reporting to the CEO, and incentive based compensation they've designed. Okay, now this is a basic clawback policy. So this is a policy. Then what they will do, how will it be enforced? It will be put in the contract. But HR managers, so now you understand, as an HR manager, this kind of aspect, if this policy is created, you can help the company by creating this policy, by putting the terms of this in employment contracts, by explaining to the key employees that you're subject to this, and by driving the right kind of behavior in the organization. Okay, another trend: technology and product companies created huge ESOP plans and also conducted huge ESOP buybacks for retaining employees and rewarding employees in 2020. Okay, first I'll explain about creating the plan. You all know what it means to create a plan. So there were two trends we saw in 2020. One was that creating ESOP plans and giving ESOPs to a lot of employees. This started increasing a lot in 2020, and the buybacks were drastically increased. The buyback, what happens when a company buys back its ESOPs? What does it mean that a company bought back its ESOPs? It has to pay off cash to an employee to buy back ESOP. Okay, it enables an employee to get cash. Okay, and basically to get monetary compensation. So what happened? I'll give you some examples. You can look at Zerodha, for example. Zerodha is a very famous listed company. Okay, uh, just confirming if it's listed. It's a very famous big company operating in the area of stock trading. Okay, and one of its employees made 20 lakhs from by selling one-fifth of his stock options in December 2020. So what happens that in stock options now, you will if you're an employee and there's no investor investing in the company, one of the ways to make money is if the company uh, buys your options back, buys your shares back. Okay, so a Zerodha employee made 20 lakhs just by selling his or her options. Another 27-year-old growth manager at a company called Urban Company earned the same amount by selling 60% of his ESOPs. To whom? To the company only. Company did a buyback. He had joined the company in 2015. So in 6 years, got a 20 lakh bonus by selling off ESOPs. Similarly, there were other companies like Car Dekho, Misho, Bharat Pay, all these companies, Urban Company, First Cry, and Academy, Neo, Shadowfax, they also announced ESOP buyback programs. Okay. As of October 2020, 365 crores was paid off to employees under different companies' ka ESOP buyback plan. And this ESOP buyback is not for CXOs, it is also for key employees. Like, it's also for employees. Forget key employees, regular employees. The scope of ESOPs has been widened for by these startups. Earlier, it would be only for key early stage employees, key senior members. Now it is being widened to incentivize and retain employees. Okay. And this buyback is a new thing that was done to pay and reward well performing employees. Now, this, as an HR manager, how do you look at compensation? You say bonus, you say discretionary bonus, you say performance linked bonus, performance linked incentive. This is one of those categories which is becoming very important. So it's no longer about cash bonuses which are based on, let's say, sales numbers, because वो तो एक महीने में, sorry, एक साल में you can show a certain number. But this is a long term incentive which is being talked about here. This is what my research on ET Prime showed. Okay, like there were 2 3 pages, 2 3 screen rolls on my mobile phone. Okay, every company is doing an ESOP buyback, ESOP buyback. Who will administer this ESOP buyback? So design will be made. Chalo, legal and CS will make a design, CFO will make the payouts, but HR has to be involved, right? How will it happen otherwise? 2020 budget gave tax benefits, not 2021, not this budget, the last one, gave tax benefits for ESOPs to startup employees, which will further increase ESOP allocation. Why? Because earlier what used to happen is, so tax is a very important aspect of giving incentives to employees, either CXOs or senior level or white collar employees. Now, the thing is that why is tax important here? Because amounts can be very big, and sometimes if you give people stock, cash, sorry, you give them shares, then if that share is recognized as an increase in income, then the employee will have to pay tax on that. Okay. And they may not have the money because they got an asset, they got a share, right? But it is adding to their income, or it's called capital gains, because they are getting a new asset. Now, that doesn't give them cash immediately, but the law requires them to pay tax. Okay. Now, those kind of issues arise. And what happened in 2020 was that the budget said that if you get the shares at that time, you don't have to pay the tax. You can pay it later. You can pay it after 5 years, or after you leave, or if you sell off your shares to somebody else. Okay, whichever is earliest. Okay, so suppose here the company bought back its shares, as I gave you the example. So when the company buys back my shares and I got a share for like $20, okay, let's say I got it for 20 rupees, okay, and the company bought it for 200. So on the 180, I will pay the tax, but that time I'll have cash because company bought it and paid cash, so I don't have a problem. So this made it more friendly for employees to get this ESOPs. And that is the reason why we are seeing a huge increase in this. Okay, because there are a lot of trends which are driving towards increase in allocation of ESOPs. And venture capital investors, this has been there from a long time in the private equity and venture capital world, that they require companies to set aside 30% of their equity capital for employees all the time. So if your company is taking 10 crore of investment, the investor will say 3 crore you set aside, or 30% you set aside for ESOPs. If a company takes 100 crores, they'll say now you set out 30 crore. Okay. So 30% is always set aside of every new investment round to give ESOPs. Okay. Now, so these 4 trends are going to explain to you just about one thing: why work for ESOPs has increased. Okay, and the other one was why you're having issues like clawback compensation increasing. Okay, clawback of director compensation. There are many more issues which are coming up. Okay, for example, arbitration or litigation with directors who uh, who have harmed the interest of the company. But I'll go to now. I'm not going to establish each trend right now. But what I'll do, so far, are you all kind of getting the sense of why there is an increase in this direction? Why there will be an increase in work for CXOs and uh, technology or startup related employees? Why these employment contracts are becoming important? Are you all getting a sense of this? How these trends are increasing the importance of all of this? Say yes if you are getting a sense, say no if you're not. Say yes if it's making sense, say no if it's not making sense. Okay, I'll wait. You let me know on chat. Okay. Hemant says yes. Anybody else? If you're following, please say yes. If you're not, say no. Why do HR managers need to know about CXO contracts now? So you got some examples of how there is increasing drive towards ESOPs and how new issues like severance compensation, or sorry, like clawback compensation are coming up. Okay. Now understand this. HR managers are the number one choice in organizations for things like performance measurement, recruitment, and appraisal related work. Agreed or disagree? If you agree, write A. If you disagree, write D on chat. Okay. Implementation of HR handbook is also their responsibility. So now what happens that because these are your responsibilities, and you are the preferred organizational player for this work, for CXOs also they will prefer that you only do it, because other teams won't have the kind of skill and acumen on performance measurement, recruitment. Like imagine you give this to CS or legal or CFO. Okay, it's not directly in their domain. Recruitment has been your domain. Of course, the promoters will keep finding top executives because they've been hiring from the time the company was started, right? But this function, y'all can perform, y'all are the experts. HR managers are the experts. Implementation of HR handbook, again, your responsibility. The only difference here is that it has to be extended to CXOs. So let's see what unique issues will arise. But if you want to become a CHRO, okay, or an HR director, these issues cannot be ignored for CXO level people also. Okay. Now let us see that how are CXO contracts different from employee or workman contracts. I'm saying that these issues you cannot ignore. But okay, if you look at if you look at the executive employment contracts, how are they actually different? Okay. See, the regular legal framework often does not apply to them, right? So you will not have the same kind of, there's a lot more room for negotiation and customization. You may need to get it do a lot of out of the box thinking. You will not look at, oh, payment of wages act has this limit, provident funds act has this limit, this is the limit on bonus. You will not do all of that. Incentive structure for CXOs is very different. You will have remuneration, all of the thresholds na ki payment of wages act, payment of bonus act, payment of, sorry, employees provident funds act, all of these thresholds will get hit and exceeded. So you will realize that you are in a space which is purely contract based. You don't have to worry about standard terms, you don't have to worry about the exact appointment letter which is there, you don't have to worry about standing orders, you don't have to worry about trade unionism. Okay, you are suddenly in an empty free space. Making sense? Right? Yes, if this is making sense. Then stakeholder considerations are huge. Okay, there are other kinds of repercussions, like you have regulators who may be involved. In case of companies it can be MCA, in case of banks or NBFCs it is RBI. Public stakeholders can be there, especially if there is listed company. You will have SEBI also being involved in many cases. You will have investor concerns. Investors can be public investors, there can be venture capital or private equity investors. Okay, these are the different kinds of investors who will have a very big interest that these issues are handled properly, which is why promoters will also want to care that ये वाले area में गड़बड़ नहीं होना चाहिए. So what do HR managers now who intend to work on this area need to think through? Okay, very important question. What do HR managers need to think through? Okay, so I'm giving you some questions and then we look at the possible areas of work. Right now I'm only giving you the questions. Question number one: what kind of term should be offered? So this is for development of your thinking. What kind of term should be offered to attract the best talent for CXO positions? Okay, so this is the direction you'll think in so that you can write the right kind of clauses in your contracts. We'll come to that. How can we align CXO remuneration and incentives to the long term interest of the company? So it's not about this quarter's target, it is not about the annual bonus, it is about the long term interest. 3 years later, we should not figure out that this director has now left the company and now we realize that he had recorded like 20% of the sales he had recorded were actually fraudulent sales, right? You don't want that. What kind of contractual mechanisms and clauses protect the organization if there is some kind of fraud? You will have to think through this beforehand, right? you'll think of aligning the long term interest, but fraud can still happen. So you'll think of, how will I protect the organization? Will I have the right to recover the money if the CXO does a fraud? What if the fraud is discovered later? CEO, CXO, CO, whoever it is no longer part of the company. How will we proceed? What if there is a dispute on the fraud about it? How will that work? How can we prevent CXOs from joining competitors or starting competing ventures or taking away key employees? Okay, these are some of the questions you'll be thinking of. What can be done if the CXOs are involved in misconduct, harassment, or other kind of activity, corruption? Okay, various kinds. So these are some of the questions to keep in mind. Okay, now let's look at the top areas of work for HR managers on CXO contracts. Are you all following, right? If you all are following, are you excited? If you are excited and following, right? F. Okay. Is this making sense? Is this something new? Is this adding value? So I'm waiting for a response and then I'll continue. Okay. Okay. Got it. So point one. Okay. Creation of golden handcuffs to encourage loyalty. Do you know what a golden handcuff is? A handcuff is, you understand, right, that the person is handcuffed, limited. But why is it called golden handcuff? It's golden because it's luring, it is lucrative. A golden handcuff is any term in your employment contract that incentivizes loyalty, staying back. So the person gets a reward, not now, all kinds of deferred rewards. Anything that says to the person that after 3 years, your remuneration will increase to this much if the company grows to this level. Okay. So anything that will increase the staying longer of the person. Okay. These are called going golden handcuffs. Okay. Not helping. This is basically what will make them help the company and stay longer rather than just leave if they get a better offer. So they should stand to lose something if they leave before that period of time expires. If I say you are hired at 1 crore per year salary, after and every year you will get a 15% increase, but after 5 years your base pay will get increased to 50% by 50%, further 50%, or it will double. Okay, or it'll double if the company goes to, if the company's turnover has doubled in the 5 years. Okay, so now that is going to encourage the person to stay back. It's going to make it harder for the person to leave. Why? Because as the years pass by, he or she is in for a more lucrative deal. Next area of work is around data protection and confidentiality. Okay, now whose data, whose confidentiality? The company itself is going to make a lot of confidential product and business plans. Okay, so that needs to be kept confidential, cannot be shared with any third parties, even internally. They will not be able to, top executives can't share it with any and every employee of the company. They cannot share it with consultants. They may not be able to take out data into their personal devices. So these whole concerns, this kind of policy you need to devise. You can have a special policy for how CXOs treat confidential data of the company. Other data is client data. Okay, how is client data, client lists to be treated? How is it to be protected? How do you prevent it from getting into the wrong hands or the hands of competitors? Okay, how do you prevent an employee who leaves from taking the data away or misusing the data? Okay, then there are going to be a law on data protection is on its way to be passed in India. Concrete timeline is not there, but the personal data protection bill is likely to be passed in India. And secondly, many Indian companies are complying with European Union data protection law. Okay, it's not very complicated, it has some area of work in it, but they are complying with that because Indian companies have business clients abroad. Okay, so they are having to comply with this law also. Now when that you have to comply with foreign data protection law, at that time what happens is that you have to you'll have to observe certain procedures, and it's a process oriented aspect. Like you have to obtain consents in a certain way, you have to inform customers about certain things, you have to maintain that log of consent, and then you have to give customers the right to delete their data, you have to disclose data breaches. All of this work is fully process oriented, and organizations have been really sluggish on creating dedicated roles. Like there is a need for having dedicated data protection officers and staff. And our bet is that HR managers, HR executives are very well positioned to take up this kind of work. Okay. Then another area that's important is the scope and duration of non-compete. Okay, so non-compete, you may, if anybody, so non-compete is the most important part of any senior level position, because what if, you hire a CEO for uh, Xiaomi, and that CEO after quitting Xiaomi wants to move on to Samsung, or you hire a CEO for Infosys, after quitting Infosys he goes to move to Wipro. Okay, or Lenovo hires somebody, a CFO, and after leaving Lenovo they want to join HP. Okay, like that. So what happens is that you don't want that to happen, because there is, one is a risk of confidentiality, the second is that you would have learned all the skills in this job and you will be using it in the other, and the company will not be able to benefit from your skill sets, right? So every executive employment contract has a non compete clause with a very, and the thing with non compete clauses is that unless it is reasonable, unless it is narrowly worded, it will be struck down. So the negotiation is usually on keeping it narrow enough to be reasonable, and on getting the consent of the executive, that this much we want, and the company will have a specific interest. If you look at any company, they will be very clear that you should not work in ABCD competitors at least. That's top level priority. So if you say that you will not compete with us, maybe not enforceable. But if you identify three or four companies where the person won't work, then it is easier to enforce. Okay. But this is negotiated, and this has to be defined clearly. Okay. Legal team will draft the clause. That's not the point. The point is that if you say that we want our non competes to be like this for each position, that HR is in the best position to identify. Why? Because you've been doing the recruitment and headhunting. You know which are the competitors in the market for your company. You know all of that. Okay. So you're the first place of information for this. Again, this scope and duration of non-solicit. Okay. So including breaches. So what is non-solicit? Anybody wants to explain to me what is non-solicit? Briefly, you want to write on chat. Non-solicit, what is it? Okay. So it is preventing your team members, any person in the company, any employee or any consultant, from leaving the company, or having another person, or collaborating with another person independently. Okay, or encouraging the vendor to terminate its relationship. Okay, so imagine one person wants to leave the company, and he says he hires the contractor, the designer of the company in which he has left. Okay. Now the company will have a problem with this. Why? It'll be like, why are you using our designers? This is encouraging people to leave, and our designers only benefit, and they are getting private contracts. They are working for us, but they're getting private contracts from ex-employees of the company. Companies won't want that. So again, but you cannot forever discourage this. There has to be a duration. There has to be a limitation. How much time can you do it for, and whom will you not work with for what time period? Okay, that has to be very clearly defined. Will you not just work with employees, or will you also not engage consultants of the company? Third party vendors may have little to do with the company's work except a small contract with them. So will you encourage them to not work with such third party vendors also? Then tracking whether it is being breached or not. Tracking whether a non solicit is being breached. HR is always aware of the conversations, that the discussions that company employees are having. Right? If somebody is facing a problem, an escalation may go to HR. Right? Now, therefore, HR is going to know कि boss ये quit करने वाला है, ये this person is being exploring these things. and there is a risk that some there can be an issue of non-solicit being violated. So HR can be in a great position to track the implementation of this, to have some kind of record that dekho, this person on the company system has been writing emails to a colleague and been asking the colleague about joining him or her in a new venture. Okay, now that's the document building you're doing, because tomorrow if your clause is breached, then you will want to enforce it. Correct? So this is a very important clause from HR perspective. You can draft it. Drafting skill is most welcome. You will also track breach and you will implement it. So you may want to implement it through your code of conduct. You may want to include it in your HR handbook and build a training around it, and then certify the employee that he's done this work. Okay, that he's understood this. After that happens, then you know what, if somebody breaches it and you go to court, you can easily say that this employee understands fully the implications of this. He has signed it and even passed a test on our ERP or LMS and has got a certificate showing clearly that the employee understands that he or she wasn't supposed to do this. And there's no objection from the employee on this, on agreeing to this term. So therefore, now there's a breach and the employee must be stopped from carrying out the activity. So that will prevent the employee from working with his or her colleague, which is basically another employee of yours. So you will minimize the damage. You can't stop an employee from quitting, but you can stop the collateral damage if the from this quitting employee soliciting your co-employees, right? Strategic implementation of gardening leave. What does this mean? So we said there is a confidentiality provision. Okay. Now, what do you do if there is a confidentiality provision, but you found out that some director or some senior level person is not doing well, and you need that person to leave the company. Okay. If that person, and you have a 1 month clause, notice clause, you give them a 1 month notice. But obviously, no one will prefer to be jobless. So the moment that person gets a notice, they will apply for jobs elsewhere. Correct? If they apply for jobs elsewhere, what's going to happen? What's going to happen if they apply for jobs elsewhere? There's a huge likelihood that some or the other part of confidentiality will be breached. Accidentally also it can be breached, and you may not be able to track it. And you want to minimize this risk. At least one thing will be there, that even that person's mind will be germinating with all the ideas, product plans, and the next 3 to 6 months ka growth plan of the company. And you don't want ki this should go out. Okay. So what will you do? That now there, what you do, it's called gardening leave. Like you sent your executive to on a leave and he's just doing gardening. It's like that. Basically the point is, the person is on your payrolls. If the person is on your payrolls, you're going to have a higher loyalty. He or she cannot apply for jobs elsewhere. And you slowly put that person out of important projects and restrict the person to regular roles, so that in another 3 to 6 months when the person quits, okay, at that time there will be no secret information which could be very damaging for the company in that person's possession. Regular confidentiality will apply, but uske paas utne secrets nahi hai, so if he wants to do harm, that person will not be able to harm much. Okay, and obviously you will enforce if he or she leaks out information. So this is another one. Okay, did you follow strategic implementation of gardening leave? Say yes if you followed, say no if you didn't. Okay, clawbacks and recoupment policies. So, did you see how we implemented the clawback? Which one you want me to explain him in? Gardening leave. Gardening leave is this, that if you think that an employee is not doing well, you want a senior employee to leave the company. If you immediately do that, that person will have access to a lot of confidential plans and data and may share it with competitors, even accidentally, or even if he or she doesn't share it, there's like a lot of things you want to try out, and he may use that knowledge in projects, okay, while working with a competitor or another company. So you don't want that to happen. So you will slowly phase the person out. You will not terminate their employment. For 3 to 6 months, you will phase them out of important projects, so that the company, your company, gets to try out whatever you wanted to. And this executive will not be aware of all the findings at all, but will keep getting salary. So he doesn't lose his job. He can't apply elsewhere to work unless he decides to quit. He or she won't apply elsewhere for work. and the value of the confidential information fizzles out over time. Followed? Next is clawbacks and recoupment policies. What is a clawback? I've discussed this, right? The example of the sales being inflated. Okay, now how do you enforce this? There is uh, Companies Act, Indian Company Law, RBI, all of them are saying that clawing back compensation is allowed. Okay. Now the question is, what about, so how do you enforce it? You will need to have a policy in the company. You will need to have a term in the contract for this. And then when you actually invoke this, you will have to do some letter drafting and all of that. Okay. And if there's a dispute, you will need to go to court or you will need to do an arbitration. So all of this becomes important. Next, severance compensation. So followed till here, followed clawback and recoupment policy. I showed you Infosys's recoupment policy, right? Severance compensation and its exclusions. So what is severance compensation? Do you know? So the commercial understanding goes like this, that entry level jobs are a lot more than senior level positions. So you'll notice that while a senior person may earn way more than a junior entry level person, it will be harder for a senior person to find another job. Okay. It will take more time. So what happens is that if a contract of a senior person is terminated, he or she will say that, okay, give me compensation for loss of office, for loss of my job. Please give me compensation, and this gets contractually negotiated. Okay, and you can say that, bhai, he's not on a job, why should he get any compensation, which is totally fine if you can negotiate it and do it. But again, law and commercial practice allows for this to happen. Okay, like you can see the CEO of WeWork, when his agreement was terminated, he was paid a huge, like I think over $1 billion as severance compensation. It's crazy, like huge amounts are paid for these kind of situations. So now the question is that how do you structure this right? In which situations you don't want this compensation to be triggered? What are the caps? What are the ceilings that you put on severance compensation? Law has some ceilings, but you may contractually negotiate a lower ceiling. Sometimes if the person who on the other side is being very aggressive, you will say that, boss, this is the cap under law, I can't pay you more even if I wanted to, right? And then you will exclude certain scenarios that, if there's fraud or misconduct or harassment or abcd from your end, for which your office is terminated, then no severance compensation is payable, because then we are not at fault. You're losing office out of your own wrongdoing, so this is on you. Okay, so that needs to be clearly negotiated and written in the contract. Okay, followed till here? Say yes if you followed. Say no if you don't, if you didn't. The next is ESOPs and phantom stocks. Okay, so there is ESOPs, there is sweat equity. Both work, they are similar, but there's a little difference. In sweat equity, what happens is that you get shares based on the amount of work you put in. In ESOPs, you will get options and you exercise those options based on a procedure, and then you get the shares. Okay, so the process in which it works, there's a slight difference in that. ESOPs are the more common way that is being used. Okay, uh, to incentivize employees. But there's another alternative way which is there called phantom stocks, where incentive is given, but it's not a direct cash incentive that, if our turnover doubles, you get this much money. No, it is a cash compensation based on the valuation of the company. So you will give somebody like 3 points, three, like you gave ESOPs, you can give them equivalent. It's like a fictitious stock. If the value of the company increases by a certain amount, instead of the shares, you will basically give them the cash value of that amount. Okay, a lot of big companies do it, and early stage companies also do it. Two reasons. Early stage companies do it because they don't want to dilute the founder equity. Okay, so they don't want to give a lot of shares to employees and they want to keep it intact, and they are happy to give the cash benefit. So for an employee, it's the same thing. You either get the cash or the shares, the value is the same. In fact, it's better if you get the cash, because then it's liquid cash in your hands. The other reason is that for listed companies which are listed on a stock exchange, they have a lot more compliance to do under Securities Exchange Board of India stock market regulations. If you do a phantom stock, your compliances under SEBI regulation and under Companies Act drastically go down. Okay, so it's a very smart way to give the same kind of incentives through a different route. Okay, and there's no mischief in it. It's just advantageous for those who want to do it. Okay, now learning how to structure this can be very, very beneficial for so why am I saying that HR has a role here? Because again, performance management, incentives, appraisals, all of that, HR is expert, right? You're already an expert at this kind of work. This is very closely related to your existing work. Then there is IP related work. What is the IP related work? Let me give you some examples. So, whatever work the senior management does, any product plan, any financial plan, business plan, pitch deck, invention, new product, new idea, new logos, anything new that they work on, okay, it, as part of their job, gets assigned, the intellectual property in that gets assigned to the company. Okay, it gets assigned to the company. That will have to be written, and you'll have to track this. You'll need to have measures to track this, so that it should not be ki paper pe likha hai and actually you have no idea. So the person is basically running a startup of his own, also investing through his wife's account into another startup and sharing all the insights from this job over there. Okay, so you will have to prevent that kind of work from happening. So you'll do IP assignment, you'll also track the usage of the company systems. You'll also have a list. Okay, so suppose you have somebody coming in from another company, you will have a list of inventions. There's a list of, basically, invention doesn't have to be a scientific invention, though it can be that, but it can be a list of important things, important codes. Okay, all of that. Now actual code won't be there, but the kinds of things that person worked on will be listed out in a schedule, and you will tell that person that, okay, this list you worked on in the earlier company, so I don't want any risk from your earlier company stating that whatever work you did for them, that IP is being violated because you're using it here, because then it'll be a big problem for our whole business. So we want you to exclude that, because we don't want to violate another company's IP. Like, we are having you transfer your IP to us, your earlier employee would have also had them transfer your IP to them. So this list basically creates the watershed, that you did all this work with the earlier employer. Now you clearly tell us that you're not going to use all this with us. Okay, this prevents the risk of such liability from arising. Okay, then now that is a preventive approach, but what if still there is a breach, and what if a liability still arises? Okay, so say Adidas sues a Nike, for example, saying that you've created a shoe which we were planning, and Nike realizes upon investigation that that is because two of its key employees came from Adidas. Okay, that can be a problem, right? So what do you do there? You had this schedule and still the employee did it. So then what will you do? You will ask the employee to pay up any loss. So if Nike loses the case against Adidas, this key employee who was hired from Adidas should personally pay up the loss if it's arising from their disclosure of Adidas's IP. Correct? So that indemnity will be there. Now this is there in contracts of many companies, but once you put it in, how do you enforce it? So again, there are two ways of enforcing. One is a letter aspect will happen. You will issue letters to the other side. The second is if the other side disputes it. It's very likely that there'll be a dispute, because the other side will say we are not responsible. Nobody wants to accept responsibility so easily. So then you will go to litigation or arbitration. Arbitration is a alternate or a private form of dispute resolution. Okay, so I'll explain to you about arbitration also. But you may need to have an arbitration with such an employee. The 10th category is working in connection with CXO related misconduct or harassment. So you've done all this work for regular employees. How do you apply it with CXOs? A lot of your mechanisms may fail because your the members of your disciplinary committee or your ICC or any committee that you have may be people who are junior to the CXO, which is where this part becomes very difficult to enforce. Okay. So to be able to enforce this, you have to create alternative mechanisms. It doesn't get enforced through the regular company grievance redressal mechanism. Even things like corruption. So you add CXO misconduct, corruption, harassment, etc., sexual harassment. Then dispute resolution with CXOs. So a lot of these earlier entries, earlier aspects, if there's a fight, if there's a dispute, very few people will own it up. So it's likely to get dragged into a final court or arbitration scenario, which is something you'll have to learn that, okay, we if there's going to be a dispute, the first thing in your position you need as an HR manager acting for a company is documentation. You need the document trail, you need the body of all the evidence. Okay, so that if you give it to a lawyer, they can make a good case out of it. So you need that documentation, the data, the letters saying that you raised the claim in time, you properly explained what the problem was. So this will be a very frequent category which you don't see with regular employees. In CXOs and in IT, you will see this happening a lot. Okay. Now, which kind of clients can you serve if you learn all this work? You can serve early stage startups. The early stage employees they hire will have very similar concerns that you have to deal with CXOs. Startups which are funded by venture capitalists and private equity investors will also have this kind of concern. Large Indian companies and listed companies will have this concern for CXO level stuff. Okay, these are the three entities you have: early stage startups, late stage startups, large Indian and listed companies. Okay, so that's a big target market, right? Like huge category of audience of huge set of entities will need that service. Now, what actions can you take? Think about this. You've got all this learning today. What actions can you take to implement these learnings in your organization? Step one, get in touch with your head HR, legal, or CS teams. If you are not working in an organization, still start reaching out to these teams, okay, and start learning this work so that you can actually understand how to perform this. Start reading more about the case studies and the trends. Start reviewing. If you are in an organization, you contact the CFO, you contact the head HR, legal, CS, and see if you can get hold of a simple executive employment contract or an ESOP plan. Okay, offer to them to assist that, I will help out in better performance management of the ESOP plan. Because what happens in ESOP plan is that every year there is a grant based on the performance. So every year you will help in performance management, which will tell the company's team ki how much to grant which employee. Then identify which other areas you can add value at. If you need help, you can always, if you get stuck with something, you can always reach out to our team. Okay, and for those of you, do you want to learn, continue learning this kind of stuff further? Do you want more access to such sessions as we had today? Did you find today's session valuable? Say yes if you did, say no if you didn't, say A if it was average. So you can join. One second, there's a WhatsApp group link. I am reloading this presentation so you will get it. There's a WhatsApp group link which you can join to get access to my upcoming list of webinars. Okay, just sharing the link quickly with you. Here's the link. So the other webinars that I'm conducting this week, you will get information about that. Okay, and I also want to invite you to a 3-hour workshop on how to accelerate your legal career, your HR career with drafting and legal skills. Okay, so how to use legal skills to advance in your HR career. And you can use this irrespective of whether your company has a legal team or compliance team, doesn't have it, it doesn't matter. Okay, I'll just show you this page. So the registration link is here. Some of you may be registered. I'm not sure everyone is registered or not. I'm just pasting this on chat. Okay, so the chat link that you have, no, chat.whatsapp.com, that'll take you to a group where you'll receive updates from us, including updates of our next few sessions. The link that I've put on after that, lawsikho.com/accelerate your HR career, is the link to a 3-hour workshop where we will deal in detail with legal and drafting skills for HR managers. Okay, and we will deal with a lot of learning for employment policies, contract negotiation, drafting various kinds of letters, warnings, dismissal letters, show cause notices, communication with regulators, briefing and assisting lawyers, preparing compliance checklists and MISs, conducting hearings, engaging with special laws like POSH, anti bribery, or whistleblower protection, more on data protection and privacy. How can you accelerate your career as an HR leader after learning all of this in detail? Okay, and what to do to grow faster. So, to register, you can just fill your name here, email, country code, your occupation, you can select. And this is a free workshop, okay? And we're doing this on 24th February, 6 to 9 p.m. If you're not already registered, you're invited to register right away. Okay. And those of you who have registered or you register right now, you can write on chat that registered like that. You can write that, you have just registered. You can go now to the page and register. Okay. Lakshmi Mohan Saripalli, you have registered. Others also are welcome to go there and register. This is the page. Let me know once you register. I'll move on in 30 seconds. Okay. Those of you who want our assistance to start working on these areas, okay, you want to accelerate your learning, you want to do it faster, then you can get in touch with Uzair. His number is written 84395723115. You can take a screenshot of this. What will he help you with? He can help you out with how, how you can build your HR career and how you can use our 6-month diploma in labor, industrial, and employment laws to progress in your career. Okay, whether it is to HR head, HR manager, senior HR manager, HR director, or CHRO position, or how you can start a labor law consultancy practice or labor consultancy practice, how you can consult startups in the area of employment and labor laws, how you can grow in the area of IR, industrial relations, these aspects. Okay, this course is now recognized by MEPSC and Skill India. Okay, this is new, and we got the recognition like few days back only for this course, and we are very excited to share that with you. So I'm letting you know that I'll just show you how to find out more about the course. Okay, so here it is. Yes, Sandeep, you can. Okay, yesterday's couldn't go up. Some of them are available. Okay, so this is the course link. I'll put this on chat also. So if you're interested in knowing further, you can reach out to Zaire on the number I shared, and you can write him a WhatsApp message saying that I want to know this. I want to know how I can use this, how I can grow further in HR. Okay, it's fine if you don't want to take the course. Also, it's fine. You have a conversation to understand how you can progress further. Okay. So, some of my upcoming webinars. Tomorrow, I'm doing a very exciting one on what are the HR challenges for HR managers in a remote or hybrid workplace. Okay, which is here, 7:30. How to stay updated with latest developments in labor and employment laws, February 18th. Okay, these are two of the upcoming webinars, and you will get more information on the WhatsApp group. Registration links are also given on here. But you can go to lawsikho.com/webinars and get this. So topics I told you, you will get the information in the chat group. So in the WhatsApp group. So I suggest you join on that link. I've shared it up on chat. Okay. All right, everybody. Amol, you can go through the YouTube recording of this, and you'll know all the slides. Is the recorded version of what available, Biplab? The recorded version of this session is available on YouTube of LawSikho. Okay, check LawSikho YouTube channel. Okay, do you all want to share your feedback, learnings, and takeaways with me now? Rianki, what was the discount? Please chat and tell me what was the discount you're talking about. Thank you. So, will you all take some action on this? Will you all take some new actions? First 10 enrollments will get an extra session. You call me, I'll try to remember. I don't remember right now which one you're talking about. Okay. Take all right, everybody. So look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a great evening. Sandeep, if you want to pursue the diploma in HR that I'm talking about, then you can reach out straight away. It doesn't matter. You reach out first. Have you spoken to Uzair? Have you understood that what is there for you, how you can gain from it? Do that first, okay? It's fine whenever you enroll whenever you feel like that's nobody is pushing you on that. But have a conversation to understand first what's in store for you and what your next goal could be. Okay, first you figure those things out, and our team is trained to help you with that. That's why I'm saying. Okay. All right, everybody. Have a great evening. I will log off now. Thank you very much.